Should we do the Black Lives Matter one first? So where have we got to with thinking about that?
So what I thought was it would be good because I know that some members are, like Charles and Alex are particular, and yourself, Layla, are sort of particular, have got a particular interest in that. So what I was going to suggest was that we don't discuss that today,
Okay.
but that we have a separate call on that to discuss the content of that.
Okay. Well, why don't we do the website now?
Yeah.
So Sean, take it away.
Okay. Well, I'll just pull it up on the screen share there and excuse me, take you through it very briefly. It's developed as a very simple website as much as possible so that it's going to be able to easily host information from inquiries, news, events planned, things like that. We also tying it in as part of the comms strategy with the Twitter feeds and details like that, with on the bottom left, the various contact details. And of course, as much as possible, going to the original sources, such as the APPG registration form from 2020. So we're keeping it all as straightforward as possible. The
Fantastic.
menu at the top has home, news, events, inquiries, and then the APPG meetings and about it. The about has the list of members, for example. Hold on, I'll go on to that. And contact details as well.
Lovely.
And then the APPG meetings listing there, looking a bit small at the moment. And of course, we'll take off the under construction once you're happy with that. And then we can build up pictures, those sort of elements within it as well, because it's obviously quite bold at the moment as we're checking that people are happy with that.
Looks very good to me. Looks very professional. Thank you.
Great,
so much.
great. Thank you very much. Yeah. And like I say, we just post on new details as they arise, keeping it as simply as possible in those terms.
Lovely. Well, I think once obviously the inquiry starts to launch and we get submissions, I mean, is the plan to sort of make the submissions public?
Yeah.
And put them up, and so there'll be a lot more content that will be driven by the submissions. I think that'd be really interesting.
We want to keep that process as simple as possible from a management point of view as well. So what we'll do is as they come in, we'll, as far as possible, take the original material in its digital form and post it like that, and then do summary reports based on what's come in, pointing to the online resources. And that's the simple way to manage it then.
Fantastic. Oh, well, thank you so much. That's really great.
Great. No problem at all.
Does anyone else want to chip in at this point with anything on the website? I mean, I think it looks good. It's a good enough, I think it's a long but good URL. So we might, that's the only issue, I guess, is if we're going to be posting it places, then it fills quite a few letters.
Yeah, it is an issue around that, but it was because the protocols, so which Joanna, our office person, has followed very closely, require you to do lots of distancing between the secretariats. So we secured the dedicated URL, but it did mean it had to be quite long by the time we were figuring out how to do it. I don't know if, Joanna, you can add anything on the simplification of the URL, because we can do some of that, can't we? Joanna's in the IHBC office.
Oh, right. Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Hiding behind the logo.
I'm going to put my picture up. I can't cope with not looking. Yeah, Layla, part of the problem is it's a Google search as well. You want to have the correct wording so that you get your search right to the top of Google and the other search engines. So that's part of it. Also, you can't have the same as other people. We have reduced it for the Twitter feed, which is now live and has got quite a bit on it, to cppeople.appg. So there are ways of getting around it, and also for the logo, in some instances I've reduced it. So yes, I agree with you. It is rather long, but I think given the that we want to get in the conservation, we need to get in the places, we need to get in the people. With my marketing hat on, it's all we could really come up with.
Fine. No, fair enough. Well, I'm sure we'll find workarounds and if there's issues that we hit, but I think that's good points, well made. Is there a provision on the site if we wanted to keep people up to date, rather than having them just come to the site, but have a little, quarterly newsletter where we have a roundup of stuff that we put out? Is that something that we've considered?
We could do that very easily. We haven't considered it, but it's very easy to do in terms of posting it. We'll also be having summary material on our own website service as well, so we can link across from there too. David Blackman, what do you think? Is that something that maybe would lead on in terms of the content?
Yeah. Well, I was planning to, Layla, I was planning to do a write-up of today's event anyway.
Great. Yeah,
So
exactly
it's the
that.
kind of thing, when we have something big going on, I think a follow-on, a product of that, it will always be will always be some kind of write-up. So yeah, so that would feed into a quarterly and definitely quarterly newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much take up there would be, but I'd hope that we are sort of adding value, and it would be an obvious place also to collect addresses and emails of people who are interested and allies in what we're trying to do and build our network a little bit. So
absolutely, yeah.
With all GDPR compliance, etc.
Yeah, so I could just say that we do that with our own. So you can have a newsletter that people sign up to. If that's the kind of thing that you're after, which I actually use MailChimp for, because that does cover all the GDP issues. And that's
I don't want to create extra work for you guys that you might not have planned for, but I can see there's value in it. I don't really mind if it's run through.
That's quite simple. In fact, that's
at our
actually
end,
simpler.
We're well used to doing that, Layla, so it's really no problem, and it's a good bit of profile for the APPG as well.
That's what I was thinking.
It makes lots of sense. Yeah. So we'll maybe build that in over the period between now and the next, and we can use David's report for that too, as a start. Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it'd be a really good way of sort of helping to build up a community, I think.
Exactly, and I know, I think we're doing this at the right time, because yes, there are huge things going on, but we do know that they are going to be pushing quite quickly with this. Because it's in their interests to do so, and it is going to be quite contentious in the House. And I can see that once people start noticing that it's happening, actually the fact that we're all set up and ready and we've got networks to go, and there might be bits of it that we're concerned about and we want to start trying to change or whatever, it could be a good conduit to encourage people to get involved. Oh, we're being great. All right, so I'm going to wait 1 minute and see how many people will join us. And I think that's the end of, unless there's anything else that anyone wants to raise before we move to the next bit. Yeah, sorry, David.
My internet went down for a minute or so there at the end when you were speaking.
Oh, I was just saying how whilst at the moment it feels like government is focusing in on other things, I don't think that that's going to be forever. And actually, we do know that this is a big priority of theirs. So I was just reflecting on how I think this is the right time to be doing what we're doing.
I just wanted that for the minutes. It looks like we have, well, we're nearly there.
Great.
Can we declare ourselves quorum at this point?
I think so.
Yes, I think so. Yes. I think we have enough members of the House.
2, 3, 4. Who am I missing? Okay. I think all we need to do with people while they're here is they may not have seen the minutes, but are they content on trust to say that we can adopt the minutes from the last time, because that's the only thing that we need to do. And if we can say we've done that, then we can move to the main briefing, which is, I'm sure, the reason why people are really here. All right, well, let's say that happened.
So it looks like we've got several members.
I don't have the list of who had RSVP'd and who hadn't and who we're waiting on. So I'm relying on someone else to tell me.
Yes, we've got a representative from Baroness Findley's office now. Hannah Bowsmith is from Baroness Findley's office.
Lovely.
Yeah, Baroness Scott.
Andrew's there.
Yeah.
Hello, David. Roger was
Yeah.
there briefly, and person is listening in.
Yeah.
And Charles is still with us. Good.
Yeah.
And we're expecting around 15, says Owen.
Yeah.
Well, I propose that we get going, because actually the bit that I'm sure many people want to get to is the Q&A.
Yeah.
So we are going to, so we're recording this bit, and is the idea that we're going to be able to sort of send this out or post this somewhere public so people can access it? Is that the idea? Yeah, I'm getting nods. Okay, superb. Right, in which case, as people join us, we'll get going. So welcome to those who are already members of the APPG on conservation, places and people. And this is the first of what we hope will be several engagement activities that we hold with members of the House, but also with the public. So this is a briefing for parliamentarians specifically, and it's on the planning white paper. So whilst we know that of course the House is very obsessed with other things right now, and quite rightly too, this is a big priority for government at the moment, and has huge implications for all of the work that we do, but also our entire landscape of the country. The white paper itself, which is entitled Planning for the Future, the government itself described the white paper as the most significant shake-up of the planning system since the 1948 Town and Country Planning Act. And while we all know that there are big issues with the 1948 Town and Country Planning Act, there are quite a few concerns about these very far-reaching and radical proposals that the government is looking to replace it with. It is meant to be a much simpler system, dividing sites across England into 3 zones for protection, renewal and growth. There's different levels of protection for existing townscapes and the countryside, and that will apply in each zone. And it will potentially be raising profound challenges for the safeguarding of sensitive historic environments, which of course is the main focus of this all-party group. I represent Oxford, West and Abingdon. We have a glut of beautiful and very nationally important historic buildings and places that we would be keen to see incorporated. And I know that my constituents and councillors and councils have concerns that safeguarding those might be harder to do in the current white paper's proposals. But before we start saying things that we do and do not like about it, we thought it would be very useful for parliamentarians to have a bit of a rundown from real experts, who is not me, on what is actually contained in the white paper. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce today, and we are going to hear for 5 to 7 minutes, but I'm not going to be a very stringent chair. I think it's very important we get the main points across. And we've got Dave Chetwin of the Institute of Historic Building Conservation. This is also the secretary that supports the APPG. So thank you, Dave, and you're going to kick us off. I'm also delighted to be able to welcome Helen Williams, who's the head of Neighbourhood Planning and Housing and Locality. Thank you so much for being here. And then last but not least, we've also got Councillor David Renard, who's the leader of Swindon Council and chair of the Local Government Association's Economy, Environment, Housing and Transport Board. So I hope you can all agree that between them, we have a lot of knowledge in the room. And if I could please invite Dave to take us through his view of the white paper and its implications for conservation and planning. Thank you so much, Dave.
Okay, thanks for that. I'd point out I also chair the board of the National Planning Forum and run 2 planning practices also. So come very much from a wide planning perspective on this. I'm not going to go comprehensively through the paper, but I was just going to raise what I think are some of the key issues or some of the key questions, perhaps, that the white paper raises. And obviously, there are general proposals in the white paper, but it leaves a lot of the detail out, and it does raise certain questions. So first, on the land categories or zones, and you mentioned the three categories the white paper covers. Now, I think they work well with some areas. So, for example, growth would be areas that are more comprehensively developing over the over the period of the plan. Renew areas may work in some urban areas, for example, and I think protect works with green space, with landscape, green belt, and designated protected landscapes. It works reasonably well. I think with heritage it works rather less well, and I'll just give the example really of the high street and town centres or city centres, which obviously they're going through quite a difficult period at the moment. So certainly a lot, but probably most of our town city centres, at least to some extent, have conservation designations as well, listed buildings, conservation areas, etc. And so the white paper suggests that would mean a protect designation, but we know as well high streets are going through very fundamental changes, and so it doesn't sit terribly well. Also, just to point out that heritage, although it has cultural value for the past and it's protected for that, most heritage is in productive use. It's part of the infrastructure of our towns, cities, our economies. So heritage isn't a purely protect thing. It's in fact, heritage can be a very, very powerful driver for economic development, growth, regeneration. And it's recognised really that part of what's making towns able to attract people, what helps them to remain viable, is the heritage offer, the sort of distinctive offer that the town has. So certainly the renew category doesn't sit well with heritage, and the protect one doesn't sit well with the high street. So I think in my response to the planning white paper, I suggested there may be a need for, say, complex zones where change is constantly occurring. There's a lot happening in the area, but there needs to be really careful consideration as well of different aspects, including heritage protection. So I think the attractiveness of the three areas is the simplicity, but I do think perhaps a little too simple, and certainly in complex urban areas, high streets, business areas, they don't necessarily sit that easily. These areas can combine elements of protect, renewal, and growth. On the local plan process, there's a couple of things there. One is that for growth areas, the local plan will effectively grant an outline planning permission. So that introduces a layer of complexity onto the local plan. And it means the local planning authority will be responsible for finding out, for gathering the evidence and information that would have been the developer's responsibility. So there's a resource implication there. The white paper also suggests, though, a 30-month period for local plans. So we haven't got a lot of detail on how that works. Clearly, the local planning process is going to become much more complicated. Granting permissions mean a whole level of detail that wouldn't be there in the existing system. So it really raises the question how this 30 months is going to be achieved with a more complex local plan process. On neighbourhood plans, I do think the white paper misses a trick really. So we've been involved, my company's been involved in intensively supporting over 100 neighbourhood plans. We've had some involvement in really quite a large number, and many of these neighbourhood plans, certainly the better quality neighbourhood plans, have they've done two things. They've brought additional growth. So some of them have made substantial site allocations. Some have done a few site allocations. Many of them deal with the high street and policies for growth and regeneration there, or diversification of the rural economy. And so they've been an easy win, really. They've also involved a lot more people in the planning process, including not just communities, but businesses, enterprises. So it's really, really given a different flavour to many of the plans. And the white paper obviously seeks to deliver more growth, but by reducing the emphasis on neighbourhood plans and passing certainly the growth strategy to the local plan, we appear to be losing those benefits we've had since the localism act brought neighbourhood plans in. And I know a lot of communities as well have put a lot of time, a lot of effort into plans. And you know, the emphasis of policy making under the new system will be much more centralised policy making and to some extent local plan level. But neighbourhood plans, it appears to envisage them all about design codes and things like that. And that really, it's actually the growth strategies that have been the driving force for many of the local communities that have got involved in them. So I think we're in danger there of actually, you know, this has been one of the successes of the planning system in the past decade, and we're in danger really of overlooking that, I think. On engagement, so, you know, better engagement, earlier engagement, more use of digital media, all of that is positive. I think where there's perhaps an assumption in the white paper, though, that needs looking at is the suggestion that if people have been involved at a local plan level, they won't want to be involved in the actual development proposals on the actual site, so we can simplify the process there. Our experience and our clients range from community groups to businesses to, you know, really wide range. Our experience suggests that's not the case. It's really quite controversial, I think, to see early engagement, meaning, you know, as implying that people don't want to get involved at a more detailed level. And for some groups, it's really important to get involved at that detailed level, you know, in town centres, businesses, or people with mobility issues, for example. This isn't about design codes and then leave it to compliance with those. I don't think that's going to work very well. And then finally, really, what's missing from the white paper, and particularly around rebalancing, economic rebalancing, the centralisation of policy making, for example, I think does raise issues. At present, we have the same policies for areas where you can buy a two-bedroom house for £50,000 or less as we do for a two-bedroom house for £500,000 or less. And there's a lot of stuff in local plans that's really important, and in neighbourhood plans, in localising the economic strategy. And I think, in particular, that I know people in many parts of the country feel, from the feedback we get, that there's an assumption in the MPPF of high growth areas and affordability is the key issue. And in some parts of the country, it's a very, very acute issue. But there's other parts of the country where viability is the challenge and getting the investment to create economic opportunity. And I think giving equal recognition, and it's not just planning policy, but you know various programs, getting equal recognition of that viability gap and the need to incentivize investment and to create economic opportunity. That's really important. And this isn't, I'm speaking to you from Liverpool at the moment, but it's not a simple north-south issue. I'm working with groups in Kent and on the south coast and in the east of the country where there are viability challenges in actually making it so that the sums stack up for developers to come and invest in the area. And I think that emphasis, it's not affordability everywhere, it's viability in some places. I'd really, really like to see that built into any changes to the planning system.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was really comprehensive, and I do appreciate that. Turning a massive document like that into a briefing in 5 minutes, you have succeeded. I think that's a very comprehensive.
One page.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much. Helen, your take, please.
Yes, thank you. So for those of you that don't know Locality, we're the membership network of over 1,000 community organisations in England. And for the last 8 years, we have been delivering the neighbourhood planning programme funded by MHCLG. And through that, we deliver kind of direct support, advice and grants to groups who are developing neighbourhood plans. And so I am going to focus on the neighbourhood planning impacts of the white paper. But in the 8 years we've been doing that, there have been over 1,000 made neighbourhood plans, and there are about 2,600 currently in development. So I think neighbourhood planning has kind of been a success in terms of take-up of the localism agenda. And we also see that neighbourhood plans are having a positive impact in many areas. They're far from being a NIMBY's charter. And there was recent research commissioned by government that it was from Reading University, and Reading looked in detail at 135 neighbourhood plans and found that together they allocated 18,000 more homes than compared with what their local plan had done for their area. I think one of the other good things about neighbourhood plans is that people can allocate green spaces, and everyone's kind of got how super important that is, particularly this year. But as Dave was saying, some neighbourhood plans have strategies that are focused on regenerating the high street or heritage-led economic development, a whole range of specific things. And there's a real worry from the white paper proposals that neighbourhood plans might be narrowed to focus on design. And certainly that's what's come through when we're talking to neighbourhood planning groups. Of course, design matters. And one of the things we think will be important is that if there are going to be local authority wide design codes as suggested in the white paper, it's really important that neighbourhood planning groups can have site specific design codes so they can nuance it for the heritage and their local area. But we're really keen that neighbourhood plans retain their current sort of areas of work so that they can continue to allocate sites for housing, they can continue to designate green spaces, so that they can have like development policies that are fine-grained to their local area. And it's difficult to see how that can continue if we're shifting to this very broad brush categorization of land into the three categories as suggested by the white paper. I suppose if we are going down a categorization approach, one way would be to explore how that could be devolved or fit with neighbourhood planning groups taking on categorisation if they want to. Not all may want to do that. One of the things the white paper has suggested, which I think could be really helpful, is that local authorities could create sub-areas for community-led housing. It would also be good if neighbourhood planning areas could do that at the same time. The white paper suggests that for community-led housing with regard to the growth and the renewal areas, but we think it would be important to also have that in any protected areas. We know in current protected areas that communities are often really driven by the need for more especially affordable housing to meet the needs of their local communities, and they actually see the kind of sustainability of their area very dependent on growth. Yeah, but I think one of the other challenges that comes out from the white paper is that moving towards a categorization system whereby the principle of development and outline permission are sort of agreed up front in the growth areas reduces the public say on specific sites and development there. So it could be from the white paper's proposals that public participation is more confined to local authority level design codes and input when local plans are being developed, but that's not often the stage that people are most excited about getting engaged in. They're energized when there's a specific proposal for their area. It's not to say that public engagement isn't important in all those stages, it is, and certainly we think there could be moves to improve that. There's techniques around how you engage people, which could come more to the fore in local planning. And we do work on the proposals in the white paper to speed up the planning process and to have more information accessible digitally. That could certainly make it more readily available to people. But at the same time, I think we need to give really careful consideration to how information and engagement reaches people who don't go and hunt out information in digital space. Their views also need to be inputted into the planning process. One thought we had going forward is, could the engagement of neighbourhood planning groups be a mandatory part of the local plan development process? A thought at this stage. The white paper certainly recognises that neighbourhood planning has played an important democratisation role in planning. So drawing on the best of that as part of the wider planning reforms is a way forward. But I think one of the real reasons that neighbourhood planning groups have said to us they're concerned about the white paper proposals is because they're largely silent on neighbourhood planning. And when they talk about labour planning, it's largely in the context of the design. So I think there's a real need for kind of reassurance from ministers and others in government about the future role of neighbourhood planning. We have heard recent statements recognising that role of neighbourhood planning, but more assurance is needed at this stage. And, there's a challenge in protecting the role of neighbourhood planning going forward with the wider proposals in the planning white paper. We certainly think at the same time there's lots to look at in how neighbourhood plans could be improved, particularly keen to see it spread to a wider number of areas, particularly to urban and lower income areas. But neighbourhood plans have played a role in ensuring that people do buy into the growth agenda, are able to really participate in how their area is designed, to the place shaping of the area, and we're really keen to protect that going forward.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'm also a big fan of neighbourhood plans, certainly. In my area, they've been incredibly successful. And as you rightly point out, it's delivered more housing, not acted as a barrier. So thank you for that. And last but not least of our presenters, Councillor David Renard, and if I might make an observation, which I'm sure you'll address, I'm very concerned by the way that it seems that this is putting so much more onus on local authorities, but at the same time setting them up against their communities, because they are going to have to manage this change, and they're going to be seen as the ones on the coalface. I'd be curious for your take on that, but I'm very keen to hear from your perspective, because it is going to be councils and councillors who are very much the ones in the firing line, as it were, of these changes, even though these are legislative changes being made in Parliament. So please, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I agree with your comments wholeheartedly. And as you say, I will come on to the LGA's response to the planning white paper. We've had a huge amount of feedback from all parties, political parties and other stakeholders in terms of their views on that, and we've fed that back into MHCLG with a very detailed response. But as you said earlier on, I'm the chair of the LGA's Economy, Environment, Housing and Transport Board, which has a particular responsibility for planning. It's worth me just mentioning at this stage that the LGA has another board called Culture, Tourism and Sport, and they have specific responsibility for the use of the assets and managing their current situation in the future. But I'd like to start by talking about the role of councils that we play in maintaining, conserving and enhancing local heritage. And then I'll come on to the issues around planning and the white paper. So councils run around 3,000 libraries, more than 350 museums, public archives, numerous theatres and galleries, And we're also responsible for many monuments, historic buildings, and even castles. So overall, councils are the largest public investor in cultural activity, spending over £1 billion a year. And they recognise the importance of using these assets to help create vibrant, healthy communities, as well as creating attractive destinations for visitors to enjoy. We all know historic buildings can also play a pivotal role in the renewal of our cities, towns and villages, and many will need to be adapted to keep them in use, bring them back into use, or to help them to respond to the new challenges such as mitigating and adapting to climate change. So the planning proposals and heritage. The planning system plays a vital role in protecting our heritage, and it helps councils on behalf of communities to protect their local assets, including both the built and the natural environment. And it also helps us to lead on the climate smart renewal agenda. It's crucial that the government harnesses the expertise in local government to ensure that any reforms to the planning system deliver improved outcomes for people, places and the environment. So for one example, the Association of Local Government Archaeological Officers can provide the appropriate advice to support more sustainable outcomes for historic buildings and ensure that historic environment matters are appropriately taken into account. During the pandemic, we've seen that people now are living more local, so these issues are more important than ever. We've seen that they're accessing their historic monuments, castles, parks and open spaces more frequently, and they're walking and cycling locally, enjoying low levels of pollution and appreciating the benefits of well-designed, accessible public spaces. So this reinforces how vital it is that as we move towards recovery, councils and their communities are supported to make locally led planning decisions for their current and future residents. Our communities want their local areas to have high quality, affordable homes built in the right places, supported by the right infrastructure and development which promotes greener and more active travel. And we also want to see more historical buildings that have the right energy efficiency measures installed to support our zero carbon objectives. The LGA's view is that these aspirations can only be achieved through a local planning system with public participation as a foundation stone on which the decisions are made. This is the best way to create great places where people are proud to live, work and enjoy their time. So turning to the LGA's view on the government's planning proposals, specifically as laid out in the white paper. The LGA is unconvinced that a radical overhaul of the planning system will support the government's ambitions to build 300,000 homes a year. With 9 in 10 planning applications approved by councils and more than 1 million homes given planning permission but not yet built, it's clear that it's the housing delivery system that's broken and not the planning system. Councils are also concerned that further top-down reforms that restrict the capacity for councils to plan for high-quality development will also exacerbate the very issues the government wishes to address. For example, restricted and unaffordable housing supply, growing inequality, the need to grow our green skills and economy, and improving health and well-being. What we need now, more than ever, is stability and certainty so that we can give developers the confidence to invest. And that's why we want to work with government to ensure a strengthened and properly resourced local plan-led system, a system that reduces the risk of speculative planning applications and planning appeals, and a system that provides the right incentives to maximise developer contributions towards affordable housing and the necessary infrastructure. Alongside this, we'll continue to call for a number of key changes to achieve a locally led planning recovery. This includes the ability to set planning fees locally so that councils can recover their costs. At the moment, taxpayers are currently subsidising the planning application process by around £180 million a year. Councils also want to see the removal of nationally set permitted development rights, allowing conversions into homes. The government's own independent review concluded that permitted development conversion create worse quality residential environments than planning permission conversions. Greater access to upfront funding for local infrastructure would also support development in local areas. And further, it's vital that any new government initiatives, for example, first homes, do not reduce the general provision of social and affordable rented homes where they're needed. Whilst we support measures to increase home ownership, not everyone is in a position to or wants to buy. So councils need to be given greater powers to act where house building has stalled. So to wind up, Chair, the LGA is working on a cross-party basis to ensure that the government gives councils the necessary tools, powers and resources required to deliver the safe, high-quality homes and infrastructure which considers our community's heritage. Thank you very much, and happy to take questions. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, David. That's really appreciated. And thank you all for your presentations. We've got just under a quarter of an hour left, which I want to dedicate completely to questions. There is a chat, so if you are able to pop your name in there, I can come to you directly to ask a question, or just wave at the screen and I will come to you. But first question to Ruth Cadbury. Welcome, Ruth. Thank you for joining us. What's your question?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm sorry I started late and I'm going to have to go in a minute. But my question is, I guess possibly to David, but probably the others may have a view as well. Is there a risk that local authorities at the moment in having to determine significant planning applications are going to feel under pressure to approve them in order to keep on top of the conditions? Because if they refuse them, you know, because they see them as overdevelopment or wrong combination of uses or whatever, or inadequate to Section 106 and SIL and conditions, is there a risk that they'll feel pressured to approve what they would have previously refused because of the change of policy from government and the words coming from government, even though all of the plans aren't fully in place yet?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Good to see you again in such a short space of time. I think the LGA position is we'd very much like to work with the government to achieve their ambitions, but actually we don't believe that they're going about things in the right way. So in the first instance, we'd like them to change direction, and I touched on a number of the concerns that we've got in my introduction. If anybody wants to read the full response to the white paper, it is available on the LGA website. But if the government proceed as they've suggested that they will, then I think the real concern from councils is that there will be an assumed acceptance that development is going to happen in certain areas that are designated as for development or for redevelopment. And then that by the time local stakeholders and councillors get the opportunity to comment on the more detailed proposals, because the principle of development has already been agreed, there'll be very little flexibility for those local stakeholders to have a say and shape the development. So as I said earlier on, we believe that it's the delivery system that's broken rather than the planning system.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to briefly comment on that? And then we'll move to Rupa's question. And we've also got a comment from Andrew Stunnell after that. Dave?
Yeah, I would agree that that delivery is part of the issue, and the comments I made earlier on viability and addressing viability gaps is particularly, particularly comes in there. I think it's one thing planning for housing, but actually we have to create the market conditions in every area where it's possible to build, sell, and to to make a profit on development. I think there is a pressure on local government, and I think that there's also a skills and resources issue there in terms of time and having the confidence to refuse poor development proposals. It should be noted, you know, most applications are approved. It's not the case that there's an issue with high-level refusals and then going to appeal.
Great, thank you very much. Rupa.
Thanks, Layla. Yeah, no, really interesting stuff. My office spotted this because I'm chair, just a small plug, of a similar APPG. It's London Housing and Planning, or Housing and Planning London in brackets. And we're doing a suburbs commission. And I mean, I can circulate around, we've got a sort of initial findings of that next week. Question I wanted to ask is about where sort of design comes into all this. There was that recent Building Beautiful panel, report, wasn't it? And just, I was shocked to find recently that Ealing, London Borough of Ealing doesn't routinely have a design review panel, a standing one. They kind of initiate them now and then if it's a big proposal. So just if there's anything on those being routine, because I don't know, locally I find there are a lot of anxieties around tall buildings. Acton is getting something that's 42 stories high. I think it will be the highest building in London. And again, we feel in the middle of all this. The councillors always say it's driven by central government. The builders, or the developers always say it has to have, these luxury units to be viable or whatever. And then just lastly, I remember being on a planning bill committee when they were reforming the whole planning gain and section 106. It was going to be community infrastructure levy or something. Just what happened to that, really? And do the coronavirus, sorry, it's a bit of a stream of consciousness, the coronavirus emergency measures, do they change anything? Because, I mean, we've had controversially, as has Ruth, locally, a lot of coronavirus emergency transport measures that people don't feel they were consulted on. And I don't know, I mean, if we're getting the vaccines, will that emergency go away even? That's it from me.
Thank you very much. Dave, you had your finger in the air, so take that stream of consciousness and do what you may.
yeah, I think there's a couple of things on design. One, the language used in the white paper tends to imply, and particularly where it's talking about what communities are concerned with, it tends to imply design is about stylistic matters. And actually, for many of our clients and community groups, they're really interested in design, but it's more about how people move through an area, how we can practically address climate change, making sure there's sufficient green infrastructure in an area, pedestrian permeability, connectivity. So it's designed very much in a wide-ranging aspect, and very much about how an area functions and how fit for purpose and whether it supports healthy lifestyles and things. And I do have a concern, particularly with the word beauty, that I'm hoping this isn't about very vocal people in an area setting out stylistic requirements for development, because that really isn't where the people we've worked with are coming from. It's much more about the fundamentals of design. I think also the suggestion in the white paper that you get people involved in design codes, and then there's no need for involvement at a site specific and development level is a misconception. And I use the word design as a verb. It's very much about process and a participatory process. Good design comes from involvement and a well-informed process. It's not something you just do codes and then actually people don't need to have a say later. I think that's a really, really dangerous misconception.
Thank you very much. Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful that the white paper suggests that there should be design codes or guidance at the local level. That could be really helpful. I agree with everything Dave said about the need to recognise design isn't just about the beauty of buildings. What we see in neighbour plans, that people are often really driven by how areas connect, how you can walk safely from, say, where you're living to where the shops are, and that's it, the areas all fit together. So but I think one of the challenges with the white papers is there's a suggestion that local plans, I think I'm right, David, aren't they, that they're drawn up in 30 months. That's quite a challenging timetable. And if communities are to have meaningful engagement, how realistic is that? And how would you get the design codes drawn up at the same time? And what if they're not in place? So these are some of the questions that need answering. So the emphasis on design is good, but going back to what I was saying earlier, we're really keen that neighbourhood plans can also retain the ability to have design codes for their areas, for their site-specific issues. I don't know if David's going to pick up the infrastructure levy question.
Well, that's what I was wondering, David. Could you do the SIL and the emergency stuff if you're aware of the answers?
Yeah. Well, oh, sorry.
Sorry, too many
David
Davids,
Renard, I
isn't there?
presume.
Too many Davids.
Sorry, I know. You don't have to be called David to be part of this group.
Yeah, I've also got concerns, as Dave has, about the word beauty, because as we all know, it's in the eye of the beholder, and what one person thinks is beautiful and somebody else will disagree with. So I think that's a really unhelpful word to include. In terms of well, design codes, yes, well, council should have design codes, because clearly what works well in one area is not appropriate for another area. Appreciate they don't. There's also the issue that Helen just touched on about transitioning between the current planning system and any new planning system. That's going to be hugely problematic, I'm sure. But on the question of infrastructure, councils are really concerned about the current proposals, because at the moment, as you mentioned, there are Section 106 agreements and SILA agreements, which means that the developers make a significant contribution towards the infrastructure of any new developments. And at the moment, the proposals are suggesting that council should borrow that money to put the infrastructure in up front. And I think we all agree that it's better for developments if the infrastructure does go in up front. But councils' budgets are already very stretched, and any money that they borrow clearly puts a pressure on their revenue budgets, which are already under strain. So we've got real concerns about that particular proposal as well, and have pushed back hard on it.
And do you know the answer to the emergency measures that have come in, and if the vaccine works, is that all going to disappear? Do you know? If not, we can maybe find someone who can answer Rupert's question.
No, not sure I can help with that one.
All right. Sorry, Rupert. Andrew Stunnell.
Yes, thank you very much, Leila. First of all, I should declare an interest. I was the minister in the Commons, or one of the two ministers in the Commons, who steered the localism bill into an act, and the neighbourhood plans was something that I've always taken a great interest in. And I've been delighted to hear two of the speakers say that it's been one of the big successes of the last 8 years. Now, that having been said, at the time that we were promoting them in Parliament, there was a lot of opposition from all sorts of quarters. And I have to say that local authorities weren't always the most enthusiastic about this cuckoo in the nest of neighbourhood plans. So I'd like to hear from David, the Local Government Association, whether any of their evidence had anything to say to the government about neighbourhood plans. And I'm hoping to hear that they were favourable about them and want to see them retained and expanded in the future, which seems to me the way to go, in the way that Helen has set out, in terms of making sure that they are more accessible to more communities. And if it's true, which I just heard, that it's all got to be done in 13 months, that's completely unrealistic. If any of the consultation is going to be meaningful at the community level.
Yes, the LGA is very supportive of neighbourhood plans, but as you say, there's not much in the white paper proposals about them. I think our concern would be that if the proposals go through as originally proposed, that neighbourhood plans, well, I think it would be very difficult for neighbourhood plans to be approved. As you say, the timescales are very tight, and any neighbourhood plan does have to dovetail in with the local plan for the local authority area. So I think there are more questions than answers on that particular topic, but yes, the LGA is supportive of neighbourhood plans.
Very good. Well, thank you all so much. We've now got to 1:45, and sadly have to bring our briefing to a close. I just want to do a quick plug though, because clearly there's a lot of interest and expertise looking Andrew and others in the room. So if you aren't already a member of the APPG, please do join. We can use the expertise. Rupa would love to do more with yours if there's ways that we can work together. So perhaps our secretariats could talk or whatever, and we can see if there's ways that we can do something together, because I'm sure there's very many similar challenges that we're looking at. And there is going to be an event that we're going to be holding, date TBC, but just a bit of a plug. We've been particularly interested in how the Black Lives Matter movement dovetails in with heritage. Of course, many of the great buildings of the country were built off the backs of slavery and other issues that quite rightly have come to the fore recently. And while society has now become more aware of it, there is a genuine question about what do we do about it now? How do we engage in these conversations, and how do we do it in a way that's structured? So we're looking as an APPG to be holding a further session on this, most likely in the new year, but just to let you know that that's going to be happening. And we are very pleased to also say that we'll have a website launch soon, and we'll be putting out a call to evidence to our inaugural inquiry. So all of this will be coming out soon, and we'll be keeping you abreast. But all that leaves me to say now is a massive thank you to Dave and Helen, David in particular, for speaking to us today. I certainly find myself better informed than I was at the beginning, which was the point. And thank you all to everyone else who came and listened in. Thank you so much for your participation. It's been a really useful 45 minutes. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your day, and see you again very soon, I hope. Bye.